Bring a Trailer podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bring a Trailer podcast. Alex here, joined very excitingly by Cam Ingram, CEO and founder of Road Scholars, a famous name in the Porsche world. How are you, Cam?
I'm doing well. It's great to be here, Alex.
Really appreciate you making the time. Excited to talk Porsches with you today, and maybe a few other cars. Road Scholars hasn't exclusively listed Porsches when I was looking back, mostly, but thought we could start just by you giving us a little background, your story. What got you into cars and or Porsches? Which came first, cars or Porsches?
They kind of happened at the same time. My father took me on a father-son trip in 1998 to the Monterey Historics. We went out to go to Pebble Beach, and I fell in love with my first Porsche. I identified on the highway as a 356. I asked my father, "What is that rolling piece of sculpture?" And my father said, "That's a 356." And he said, "It's a 57." And we kind of followed this guy because we were both on the way to Laguna Seca, and he pulled over on the road. My father just pulled over. And, what's so great about the community, Porsche community, is the guy wanted to talk about his car. And from that moment on, I was an art student. I was studying bronze sculpture. I was working in a foundry pouring bronze. And so it was a pretty easy transition to see functional artwork, on the side of the road. And that was the hook. And then, of course, later that day, I saw my first, never seen a 550 Spyder. And, I was captivated even then by the shape of a 550. And of course, it's iconic. Porsche's first motorsports built project and James Dean, all that good stuff. And that was it. That was the hook for me.
And those early cars really do have kind of it's like, I was kind of like, holy crap, Cam, a sculptor. I love that. They do have a sculptural kind of look to them, those early cars.
Yeah, they really do. A gentleman named Erwin Commenda, he was called the body chief engineer, but he's the one who penned, of course, the Volkswagen, the KDF Strength Through Joy program, that Porsche. Without that program, Dr. Porsche never gets to the Porsche factory because they had to pay off those royalties and taxes from the Volkswagen project. So they had to reopen the factory, so to speak, and start things. And, as I engage with young people and they walk in our showroom and our restoration shops, it's fun to see the light go off because a lot of them have come from like a steampunk. When you show them an aluminum crafted, hand-built race car, it just, the tactile feel of it appeals to them once you start pointing out things.
Of course, that makes total sense. Brief sidebar. Did Commenda design the weird proto Porsche thing, the kind of late 30s or the staggered seat car? I don't remember what they're called.
The Type 64. Yes.
Yeah. That's another Commenda, somewhere between a Beetle and a 356.
Correct. And, just recently, Porsche has embraced that story. And of course, their part in World War II as a family, as, anyone that was a designer or manufacturer in Germany, there wasn't many options.
Totally. It's a tricky history, but important to be honest about, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
So where do you go from there? You see 356, you love it. Your dad was obviously already a Porsche guy. Where does it go next? You're chasing one down to have for yourself?
Where we went next is it was serendipitous in the town I was going to college, which was in Greensboro, North Carolina. There was a 356 specialty shop, and I went down there and I harassed the owner. And he was adamant that he wouldn't hire a college kid. I had bad experiences. I'm not going to hire a college kid.
You want to go down and turn wrenches, Cam?
Yeah, I did. And so I literally, like the old classic story from the old timers, I started sweeping floors there, and I worked there for free for a month to show that I was committed to the idea. And it wasn't just a fascination of being around cool cars. That's what every guy says when they get in the car business. I just want to be around cool cars. And that's where I started my education. So I worked there for 5 years in the restoration shop.
Amazing. So they were doing metal work as well as mechanical?
Yep, the whole shebang. So everything from fab work to paint and body. So full restorations on 356s at a time when 356s were kind of that last era in the late 90s, early 2000s, where they were still somewhat reasonable within striking distance for the average human being.
And they were... At that time, people are kind of looking for restorations for kind of Concours, right? Restoring them back to stock Concours kind of deal, right? Not as much hot rodding.
Yeah, actually there was quite a bit of outlaw movement back then, and that's what it was called, was the 356 Outlaws. But it wasn't to the extent that obviously it's an industry today, but back then it was putting disc brakes on a 356A from a later car, or putting a 912 engine into a 356A or a Super 90. So it was like in period hot rodder things. And, and that was a whole different sidebar community because the purists were like, oh, those guys are crazy.
Yeah, totally.
That's sacrilege, that.
Yeah, totally.
And it's funny now because in the world we live in, back then, it wasn't a very welcoming atmosphere for a young guy. It just really wasn't. I'm not going to revision it and like romanticize it, but I had so many guys at that time say like, "Get away, kid! Why are you interested in this stuff?"
Yeah.
And it's the reverse in today's world. We're trying to get young people. I'm trying to get young people to come work and see that there's different alternative pathways to
Yeah.
success. If you don't want to go to college and pursue a degree, there's other ways if you're passionate about cars.
I'm a pretty firm believer in that the Porsche world does a pretty good job with that. You go to Lufkakult or something, and there's young people with tattoos. It looks different than
Yes,
a,
yes.
a muscle car show or something like that. Not to denigrate those cars, I love muscle cars too. What kind of cool stuff was coming through that shop 25 years ago or so, Cam? Right?
Yeah,
Were
there
you
was
doing
a lot of it
Carreras
was
and 550s, that kind of stuff, or
Uh, we had, at that time, there were, my first prototypes, a 906, a 904, a 910 came in. I was totally captivated by that. It was a rolling shop in terms of the customers coming in were unique and interesting guys, and everything from F40s and F50s, where we were doing, back then we would paint a bumper. It wasn't that big of a deal, So it was just a little bit of everything. A lot of Carreras, a lot of four cam Carreras, and that's of course piqued my interest into once you go down that rabbit hole. And people always say, what's the big distinction and why? I don't understand the value difference between a push rod and a Carrera. And when you understand that those four cam Carreras are like an automatic watch, and I always use that analogy. It's like, you look on the back of a clear case of a watch and you see all those gears. And that's basically what a four cam engine is. It's
oh my God, those Fuhrmann motors blow my mind. I've never driven one. I bet you have. On my notes here, one of the things I have is to ask you about them. They have roller main bearings. Am I right about that?
Yep, that's right. All the way up to mid '58, they had the roller main bearings, and then they went to plain bearings. And obviously, those engines, you had to be methodical in how you started those cars and warmed them up. And you always wanted to keep the revs up. That's why you see anytime you see some kind of old literature, either club publications, that's always like revs up on early Carreras. And obviously, when they came out with the plain bearing crankshafts, that was not an issue.
Yeah. Man, there's correct me if I'm wrong, they're all bevel drive. There's no gears or chains, right? It's all
Correct.
drive shafts going out to drive the overhead cams. I mean, what a work of art.
It literally looks like an auto union
Totally.
1930s thing, and it's so sexy when you see them. And that's the unfortunate part. We actually have a timing bench where we set the gears and the timing outside of the case. Is that then we just plop all the gears into the case itself, just like the factory did. It took us a while to figure that out. But it's a really sexy thing. And when you drive a four cam, like when you put a customer in driving a push rod, then you take them to a four cam, it's the torque. It's literally the instant torque that's the difference
Yeah, I
maker.
was going to ask you what the kind of driving characteristics are. I would imagine they're quite different.
Yeah, they are quite different. It's a torque factor. Then obviously the four cams, they don't peter out after 4,000 RPMs. They keep going strong.
Amazing. We've auctioned a few of them separate from the car. People used to separate them from the cars, as you know very well. Probably wanted to put a pushrod motor in and not have to worry about rebuilding the Fuhrmann, I presume. And man, those motors alone are as much as a nice 356 Cabriolet.
Yeah, for sure. They still go depending on what generation motor, and on the low end, $100,000, and on the high end, if it's a special GT or Spyder motor, you're going to pay close to 300,000. So, and even
Wild,
more if you need that motor if that's the motor for your car.
right? If it's got the right numbers on it.
100%. You're in a total conundrum at that point.
Have you done that before? Have you reunited? I presume that's a thing that's happening a lot now, reuniting chassis with their correct motors.
It is, in the modern age of the information age, it is a more common occurrence, and it's not just forums. We've probably had four reuniting stories just through our own social media and promotional things that somebody has reached out. Literally, in the 22 years we've been in business, we've had four times where someone's like, "I have the motor of that car. Would that guy
Amazing.
would that person be interested?" And of course, the answer is always yes.
Hell yes. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Better than the alternative, right? There's a human element to it than having to try to pry the motor out of somebody who doesn't want to give it
100%.
up.
Well, there are those. We all know, and that doesn't not just in the Porsche world. We know of many parts hoarders and engine hoarders of like, no, it's their badge of
Yep.
honor. So
For sure. While we're on the topic of motors, one of the other things I wanted to ask you about, you already mentioned 906s, and I want to get into this eventually. You guys listed a 908 on the site. What about the 8-cylinder motors? Do you have a fair amount of experience with those?
we recently, I guess, something to be braggadocious about, but we sold that
Brag away, Cam, please. We're ready.
we sold that 910 on BAT, and it's such a great platform for all the reasons we know. Because I mean, what a unique space! I had so many critics in my own industry say, "I cannot believe you listed the 910." And I said, why not? Because if you think about it, as we all know, you have 7 to 10 days or longer, depending on how many days you pick, to educate the audience on what you have. Not just educate them on the particulars of a 910, but the car that we ended up selling for 2.5 million was a development car from Porsche that had the 8-cylinder. And this car came with two motors. So it had a 6-cylinder in it and it had a Type 771 8-cylinder, which is one of the most epic, it's a flat eight. It's
Yep.
just an epic motor, right?
The 908 is my favorite plastic Porsche, but I almost like that motor on the stand more than
Yeah,
the car. It's
100%.
so beautiful.
Yeah. Plus the running hours don't get charged. You don't get charged for the running
Right.
hours when it's on the stand. So
Right. I was just going to ask if you've been behind the wheel and have some seat time in cars with those motors and what they're like. That's the one of the kind of most interesting motors to me. I know there was a small 8-cylinder in the Grand Prix car too, wasn't there? I don't know if
yeah,
that's related to the one that was in the 908.
it was not. That was not related to the 908. I mean, the 908 is by far my favorite of the fiberglass Porsches. It is, in terms of the aesthetics of it, particularly a long neck, a long tail 908 is just, sex on wheels. And, everyone gravitates to the 917. Of course, it's Porsche's first overall win at Le Mans in the 917. But, they had great success with the 908 program, particularly at Daytona, which was a very important race for Porsche. And, America has been Porsche's number one market for a long time until recently. And, it's again, driving a 908, driving any of these variants, you can feel the genetic strain starting off in a 904, going to a 906, 910 being really the last car that you can operate by yourself. You don't need a team of people,
Right.
and you can drive on the street. And then as soon as you jump into the 907, 908, you're jumping into true motorsports. You need a team. You need folks that know what they're doing, and but it's such a unique experience.
I bet. I'm jealous of all those things. I love that era and completely agree with you that the 908 is the sexiest one. You don't get the 917 without the 908, and there's something about the kind of plain white livery era.
Oh,
Although I like the open top short tail 908s too, with the great Gulf liveries and everything
yeah,
on
the
them. But
spiders. Yeah.
man, we got off. I wanted to follow your story. We got off talking about
Oh
eight
no,
cylinder
that's
cars and everything.
far more interesting than my story, man. So,
I'm all over the place. Well, so that's interesting. You worked in a restoration shop, and does that kind of inform you starting Road Scholars? Is that kind of the genesis of it? Is that where your brain starts turning into, hey, I do,
yeah,
set out my own shingle here?
it's an interesting thing. I think when I worked at a restoration shop for 5 years, I never had the forethought of one day I'm going to own my own business. It's going to be, but I certainly had a lot of life lessons because after that, I worked in two other shops. So I traveled a little bit of the country to see, just the, different attitudes and cultures on the East Coast, West Coast, different shops. And I took a lot of life lessons of what to do and what not to do if I ever was in the privilege of being in leadership, right? And some of those factors are I worked in really dirty shops. I worked in shops with no AC or no heat. Just simple things like that. I worked in shops that had no benefits,
You
and
ever get a
so
tool thrown at you? I got a tool
oh
thrown at me one time
oh
when I was a young grease monkey.
yeah, I got laid out. So I went into the paint booth after something had been painted the day before, and I went in that morning, and I was told by another guy that knew what was going to happen to go ahead and move everything off the paint stands. And I went there. Of course, my fingers latched in the paint. Painter came in, and when I turned around, he literally clocked me.
Oh my God.
And so I woke up, and this would never happen in today's world.
No. But there's a leadership lesson for you, for God's sakes.
Right.
Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a different world. I think, a lot of times, and when I think about those environments and some of the men were as hard as the metal they were shaping,
Absolutely.
and you,
Absolutely.
it sounds like you had that same
I
experience.
mean, I mean, a lot of these guys are dead of cancer now. I remember the guy I worked with. I mean, these were guys who knew, who'd worked on Porsches in period. They knew how to set up an MFI or a carburetor like nobody's business. But
Yeah.
I remember guys who used to rinse off in the solvent tank. They
Oh,
would just
yeah.
like that's how they'd clean up at the end of the day. I
Yeah.
mean, pretty unbelievable stuff.
Yeah, and cigarettes, I mean,
Oh
cigarettes
yeah,
and booze was never very far away, and
never.
it's kind of the now it's a total reverse. Like the car culture, I can't tell you. In the last month, I've probably interviewed 3 graduates with engineering degrees. You know,
Hmm.
and so it's
Hmm.
interesting. It's just an interesting flip of the culture in terms of the industry side.
A lot of dough in it now, especially Porsche, right? I mean, I often think about, I don't want to go too far afield or criticize some of the wild builds, but in the '90s, my dad's kind of a hot rod guy. I remember when Boyd Coddington was just modify hot rods in any kind of way. Does it look good? It doesn't matter. Just keep spending money. I worry Porsche's in that mode a little bit now. It's almost like not whether you should do it, can you do it, right? And build just really, really wild stuff. And part of what the tool throwing and all that stuff is terrible. But when I first got into these cars 20, 25 years ago, it was, it's more working class in the Porsche world, right? There
Oh,
were, like, the
100%.
guy who owned the shop I worked at never graduated from high school, but he was a artist when it came to tuning up, a set of carburetors.
Oh, 100%. You couldn't have said it better. And it is interesting. I mean, we're the same vintage, and I think about Jim Bala and Roof and all those things. That was extreme back then, or DP of Porsche world. And now, that's the great debate, and it's not really a debate, at least to me, because there's room in the space for all these things. I mean,
Yeah,
I think we proved that. And Bring a Trailer is a great example of that. And it's not just in Porsche, but you go to any of these BMW or Ferrari forums, and you can just see the people aren't stuck in that same mindset. Of course, it still exists, but 356 guys don't talk to the early long
yeah.
four wheelbase guys, and 996 guys aren't talking to, I mean, they're their own tribe, but there's a lot more community, I think, just because there's space for everything.
Totally. And I didn't mean to cast aspersions. We're big tent folks here. And I mean, we list RWBs and we list,
Yeah.
perfectly restored stock 65, 911s. And I love both, to be totally honest. So,
And we need the RWBs. You know why? Because young people respond like, Singer, RWB, Gunther Works. They don't have a historical perspective of Porsche as a brand,
yeah,
or automobile history in general. So if we get something that pulls them in, and that's, we featured Magnus Walker on one of our Group P Porsche listings, right, on BAT. And he's such an important figure because he brought such a new generation into Porsche.
totally.
It through his
Hmm.
content, through his movie. He's a guy that is, Magnus says what he thinks, and that's also a breath of fresh air because you get what you get the real thing, and he
Yeah.
is that real way in person. So
Well, yeah, I don't know if this has happened to you, Cam, but as I've gotten older, it's like, let people like what they like. Don't tell
yeah,
people what kind of music they're supposed to like or what kind of movies. People's taste is their own taste. Like, let them enjoy that, right? And embrace what other people like. And that's, the Porsche world is maybe a good microcosm for that because to your point, there's such a wide variety of what you can do. I mean, they've, been building these cars for almost 80 years now, right? So, I mean, there's everything under the sun, which is part of what's exciting about, I do worry maybe a little bit people get sucked into just the Porsche world because it is so broad. You can kind of almost ignore everything else. But
uh,
and there's other cool cars besides Porsche. Sometimes I have to remind myself that.
yeah. No, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I was just in Ohio visiting a collection, and he had all these new demons, Dodge demons, and kind of through osmosis, I know what they are and read about them, but like seeing them in person, I was like, oh my God, this shit is cool.
Totally.
Like if you don't appreciate those for just the stripped down raw horsepower nature of them and all these, like he was showing me that like several of them, he completely ordered them without a passenger seat or no sound deadening. I was like, this is badass. Like
Yeah.
this is a real RS. Like this is what a Porsche RS wishes it could be, Like,
Totally. Totally.
can you imagine what Porsche would charge if they were allowed to do that? Like
Yeah.
you guys
10
would be like
grand for a right seat delete.
right seat delete.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of stuff were you into, Cam, outside of the Porsche world? I know Road Scholars has sold some other stuff. I was looking back at your site history. You guys have been selling for 7 or 8 years now, and I remember the first two cars. It was a Foose. Speaking of hot rods, it was a Foose coupe
Yeah.
that was the first car you listed on BAT, and then you had a really low mileage yellow TR6. That one stuck in my head. That was a
Oh
early
yeah, it was like 300 miles. Yeah.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
super low mile car. I don't know how you came upon those, or if you're into those cars, or what kind of catches your eye. But I'm curious where your interests are outside of the Porsche car world.
Well, if you're a dealer and you want to kind of sell the wares of great stuff, every deal is convoluted. Like I've had to buy a helicopter before to get a deal. I've had to buy a house before to get the cars in the deal. Like, and I became a boat broker just because I had to move boats to get the cars. And so,
God, boats and helicopters, that's worse than Porsches,
oh my
Cam.
God, like, and that's a whole different level of slime ball. But uh, anyways, uh, it's interesting because in those car collections, usually when when someone's buying a Porsche from us, there's usually interesting trades. And a lot of the times it's the low mileage things that if you see something that's off Porsche brand, it's because we've oftentimes had to do a trade and take that in for something. So, but I love Alfa Romeos, I love Lancia, I love the Delta Evos. I love all the older Alphas. I love BMWs. I could totally, fly my Beamer boy flag. I drive an E36 M3 every day.
Oh man, we really are of the same era. That is the car for me. I know that's the unloved one, but when I was in high school, that was the car,
Oh,
right? Was an
same thing.
E36. Yep.
Yeah, all these like rich kids I went to high school with had one, a brand new one. I was like, oh my God, like these guys. This one guy walked out one day. He goes, check out this BMW I just got. It's got a V8. And I was like, bro, you're killing me. You don't even know what's in the car. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
but yeah, the E36.
That's your daily driver, Cam?
That's my daily. That's
Sick.
Yeah,
That's great.
the ultimate unloved momentum car.
Totally. Totally. I mean, for me, this is another thing that's happening to me as I get older is like, I want to be able to, like, aesthetics kind of matter to me. I want to be able to look over my shoulder and be like, oh, I like the way that car looks that I just got
100%.
out of. And the E36 is the one for me, right? Because that's the car from my youth, right? People talk about that all the time. It's my favorite looking one. Maybe
Yeah.
not the one that holds up the best, but it's the best looking one.
Yeah. No, I've got like over 100,000 miles on mine. And of course, I service it regularly in our shop. And I had an E39 for a hot minute because I always wanted the, M5. And I was like, oh, this is, but I actually missed driving my E36. I missed the nimbleness of it. I missed the size of it. And to your point, I guess like anything the one consistent thing about cars and different demographics in the new generation is they buy what they love and what they grew up with. And
Yeah,
you and I saw the E36, and that was such a unique styling, with that belt line going across the whole car.
absolutely. I'm a kind of a sedan guy too. What's the spec on yours?
My E36 is two door. Obviously, it's a white and dove gray interior with the Vader seats.
Great, great spec. Hard to go wrong with those cars.
Yeah, I like anything motorsports white, like in general.
Same. My dad was I like Porsches because he liked Porsches, and it was always white for him, right? That's the German racing color. That's the color that those cars are supposed to be. He feels strongly about that. Um,
Particularly
so
in this PTS world we live in, like
yeah,
PTS is supposed to be a rare thing, and yet everybody has PTS.
I know. Well, I I don't want to dive into it, but it's now like an option, right? So it kind of takes away from what that term used to mean, which was so
Right.
cool that you could go to FISOC and get kind of whatever you wanted. But now it's like a thing you can tick on the option list. So
Yeah.
reduces a little bit of the specialness.
Yes, exactly.
I have bright colored Porsches though, so I have to admit
Nice.
I've I do like bright colors.
What is your favorite Porsche in the stable right now?
I have two. I have one that I just drove it over here today. It's the worst rear engine Porsche. It's a 912E, the fuel
Oh
injected
yes, that
return
makes
of the
sense.
912.
Yeah,
Uh, I've had that car since my dad bought it for himself, and it's shamrock green, which is kind of a viper green-esque color.
yeah,
Um,
that's awesome.
and my dad bought it when I was in high school. I had a Carmen Ghia that got smashed, and so I started driving that car and have never stopped. I've been driving it for gosh, 25 years now. He bought it in 1999, and it's all
Wow.
beat up, and I've put over 100,000 miles on it. Take it on rallies. Has a 2.4 liter fat stroker motor in it. So it's
Oh,
got 911-ish performance, we could say, I
yeah,
guess.
Alex, this is what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Sleeper Nation.
Yeah, well, if 160 horsepower is a sleeper. But I also have a 996 GT3 that I really, really like that's
Ooh,
speed yellow. That's my newest Porsche.
congratulations
And
on that.
man, that car's great. I'm taking it to Lufka Cult next month in SoCal. You coming out, Cam?
I am. I'm looking forward to it. I'm coming out there with my brother. We're gonna show our 935, the car that our father bought, and Jeff Sword has raced up Pikes Peak 4 times now, 5 times.
What's the background on that car? I read that you had a 935, but what's the story on your particular car?
So it's one of the 935, 19s that they came out. What was that? 2019 actually. So that's when those came out, and
Oh, this is the second generation
second
935 for the
generation
new.
car.
Yeah, okay. Oh, those cars are sick. We've listed a couple on BAT.
Yeah, and I think we're one of the few. We're not the only ones, but we're certainly one of the few folks using it. Obviously Jeff has raced it at Pikes Peak to great success, and we use it often for track days. And it's like one of the most sublime cars you could ever drive. It is just
School me on what that car is exactly. Is it even 911 based, or is it a complete? Is it its own thing completely?
It's based on a GT2 RS, and it's just a GT2 RS. I mean, it's got obviously the 935 body kit, but then it has adjustments to the map system and different adjustments to the suspension. But it's like if the GT2 RS Club Sport was full motorsports, that's what it is.
Gotcha. And it's carbon body work, right? Isn't
Carbon
it?
body, all carbon
Yeah.
body. Yeah,
Man, I bet that thing's a handful, and it's pretty
it's
close
really
to race car spec, right? They're not street cars at all.
no, they're not street legal, and they're a little heavy if you're going to criticize them, but they're not a handful. That's the thing. I mean, Jeff has always said, and I've of course driven the car on 3 different big tracks, and that I actually had the honor of driving that thing at Indianapolis during the Sports Car Together Fest, and I did a time attack, and I ended up winning. And
Whoa.
I was changing out between that and my Cayman Club Sport, and can you imagine going from 800 horsepower to 450? And I was like doing that in different sessions, but that
A
was
little more
probably the
torque too with those turbos, right? I mean, that's
oh,
just got quite a bit of power under your foot.
but we all have if you're lucky in life to have a surreal experience like that, like getting to race that car in a time attack format at Indianapolis, was just really special. So
This is road course and then up onto part of the banking.
yeah, exactly.
Amazing. Oh man, what an experience.
Yeah, it was cool.
I'm actually going to go to the 500 next month. I'm really excited about it. I've never been
Oh
before.
man, that's awesome. I grew up going to the five. My dad would take us. That's a special experience.
What are the tips, Cam? Where are the places to go? My buddies say
Oh,
carb day, not to miss carb day, and then where are the best places on the track, or your favorite places to
I
go
mean,
watch?
just the infield. That's where it's like Woodstock and Lollapalooza meshed. I mean, it's a lot of beer bellies and boobs. It's great.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'm ready for that. I think I've been prepped for that a little bit, but I'm ready.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Awesome. You guys bring anything else out to Lufka Cult?
No, that's it. The older I get, we've been showing cars for quite a while. And the older I get, the less ambitious I am to bring like 5 cars to a show. Because
There's a few logistics involved, huh?
there's a few logistics, and you end up where at least when you bring one car, and we've been asked to bring stuff, and we're always. My father prided himself on sharing the cars, and
Mhm.
we continue that as a family and as a collection. Is like we share the cars. We're very grateful and appreciative to be caretakers of these, but sharing them is like the true joy. And that sounds cheesy, but it truly is. It's the sharing of them and the camaraderie of this. That's one of the best things about social media is that we can stay connected about this passion. Of course, it's a rabbit hole, but again, bring a trailer. It's instant price verification on any given day, but also instant entertainment.
Totally. I mean, above all else, Bring Trailer's a community. I mean, that's really at the heart of the success, right? Randy built it for many years before it was an auction website, and I was a fan applying to every job they had until I got one. Just because it
Wow.
was, every morning I'd wake up and read Bring a Trailer. That's like what I did every morning, and we still hear that all the time. When we have our own events or I meet somebody who's a fan of the site. That's what we hear the most often. I wake up, cup of coffee, Bring a Trailer, and that's what I was like till I got a job here. I still wake up every morning and read it, but for slightly different reasons. I'm paranoid about the 800 live auctions, the 800 auctions that are live 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of responsibility.
It sure is. We've grown. We've got a few people sharing it. It's not just me, thank God. I was going to ask you a little bit about the origins of the collection and kind of what's in it. What are the highlights and do you guys keep everything running? Is everything ready to kind of go out to a show if you do want to
It is, yeah.
bear the
No,
brunt of the logistics of getting things out?
yeah, 100%. Our my father often made the joke of it's a hobby turned into a sickness, and we certainly have themes in the collection. It's mostly all rare production Porsches, and all of our race cars except for the 935 are street legal. And I think that some of the highlights would be our 550, our Carrera Abarth GTL, which they made 20 of, and a great car. And
Is
the
that the car
9,
behind you there? I've been looking at it this whole
yes,
time.
yeah, that's it with all the louvers.
Yeah, those are beautiful.
Yeah, that's a car that we restored and we won the Triple Crown with. We won Pebble Beach, Amelia Island, and Villa d'Este. And if you're a
Amazing.
restorer, like if you can achieve that in your career with one vehicle, winning the Triple Crown, that's like it's quite a thing. So
Are those all Furman powered cars?
yes,
Okay.
and they came in 1.6, and then they came in 2 liters.
2-liter Furman is good stuff.
Yeah,
Speaking of, industries that are things that are getting trickier and trickier to do, how many people can even fix a Furman? I mean, do you guys will you rebuild one at your shop?
we are. I think there might be more, but we're one of three companies and individuals in the country rebuilding them, and because of their value for so long in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. There was a lot of deferred maintenance, and people got into these motors and there weren't parts, or they didn't have the CNC technology we have now.
Yeah.
So when we get these engines, we have about a year and a half backlog on just getting the engines disassembled because we got about 12 projects in wings. And what we find is most of these engines are built with used parts.
Sure.
Yeah.
And probably were rebuilt a long time ago and kind of haphazardly, right?
100%. So they're
Yeah.
like, in many cases, they're grenade. They're
Yeah.
grenades waiting to explode.
And you have one guy, one salty old dog who rebuilds them?
We do. We have a salty old dog. His name is Simon Briggs. He's our resident Brit. He's from England, and he has tea time every day at 3. And you certainly don't interrupt his tea time. And but it's great. Like his room, he has a clean room. It is the antithesis of an engine room in terms of it is stark white, clean, and he usually has classic music playing or Pink Floyd. Uh, so it's great. Like he's what you want your 4 cam engine builder to be.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. That's the guy. That's the guy you want for sure. You wanna know you're in a safe pair of hands with one of those motors. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. So, what other exciting stuff do you have coming up in the near term future, either for the collection or for Road Scholars, Cam?
Well, we're building a new facility. We're going to be building a new dealership showroom facility. We're growing. We have about we have about 50,000 square feet of facilities in different shops: our paint and body shop, our fab shop, our service facility, and I'm doubling down on the future of brick and mortar. And sadly, what I see in the industry is we don't have enough shops that can do
Yeah.
the work across the board. Service shops, paint and body shops, and restoration shops at any level. We just don't have enough. There's a few new shops in the Porsche world that are doing a great job. Pete's Customs, Deluxe Customs, that are Porsche specialists. Great people, great guys. But that's my real concern is, across the board in my verticals, I have at least 3 young people in each vertical as apprentices. And, they've come organically into the shop and not through like technical programs or schools like McPherson. These are all guys that came in and have proven that they really want to learn.
That's really awesome. You've mentioned that a couple times now. Your stewardship of bringing young people in and really getting them trained up. Teaching them. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. Teaching them the skills that the salty old dogs. We want them to pass those along, right? So
100%.
that people can keep this going forward. I worry about who rebuilds a Furman 50 years from now. Somebody's still going to want one rebuilt, right? So somebody's got to learn how to do it.
And that that's and you asked me what's going on Road Scholars. It's getting that brain dump and getting the next generation trained up, but also we have an eclectic like right now. I just walked across the street. We have 3 959s in the shop for service. We have a 993 GT2 in for service. We have the second to last 550 Spyder that we're restoring. We have a 75 911 Turbo, which is the first year of turbo production. This car was delivered in flat black from the factory. So pretty cool project. And we're restoring the 94th Porsche ever built. one of the first
Wow.
100 cars, and we've
Is that
had the
still a is that still a Gamund, or
no,
what is that?
that's basically a split window coupe, and,
Okay.
this is a car that, Miles Collier, Mr. Collier, bought when he was relatively young, and he's kept it all these years, and it's a great honor. It's probably one of the feathers in our cap of getting to do a car for him, because we've done some cars for some, pretty astounding collections, but I respect what he's done in our automotive field so much.
Oh, huge deal. I was just thinking about him the other day because my dad used to go to the Briggs Cunningham Museum, and the
Yep.
Colliers bought that when it went out,
I mean, that is the ultimate. That is like top 3 purchases of all time. Like, that was
totally,
one of the best collections in the world,
totally.
and he got
Yeah.
one fell swoop.
I can't remember his name right now. My dad would kill me, but the curator of that, something Burgess was his name. He
Yep.
used to, I remember I was 3 or 4 years old. He would balance a dime on the hood of the Bugatti Royale, and he
Yep.
would start it and the dime wouldn't tip over. That was his like parlor trick, which
Yeah.
was so cool.
To your point, though, that's what we're missing. Like, and that's the one thing beyond the tangibles, it's that enthusiasm, right? And keeping young people engaged and becoming real craftspeople.
Uh-huh.
And that's what I'm extremely proud of our organization and our company. It's our company because it takes a team, and it takes people that are passionate and want to be a part of something bigger
Yeah.
than themselves, right? And I
Yeah, or
just
even to your earlier point, just getting somebody excited, just getting them enthusiastic,
right.
right? That's really what life is all about as far as I'm concerned.
When you see a young person tune their first carburetors and like actually can tune it without a meter and a flow meter, and they can tune it by ear, I mean, that's an exciting transition for that person, right? And now they've crossed over into special air. And
Yeah.
as I tell young people, whether you stay here, and hopefully you do, I've invested this time and money into you, but these skill sets, you can go anywhere in the world in
Yep.
today's world, because
Yeah.
there's such demand.
A young guy tuning a carburetor. They've moved into
Yeah,
wizarddom, wizard world. It's amazing.
bottle that magic. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. How big's the staff these days, Cam? It sounds like it's more extensive than I thought.
no, I mean I have an opinion about that. I think we're right at the sweet spot. We have 25 people on staff, and we're spread across all of our verticals. But
That's sales side and restoration side combined.
I am the lone sales department.
Oh, all right. You are. I'm looking at the sales
I'm
department.
looking at the sales department. I have 2 incredible guys that do a great job. Andrew Maturko and Trey Saltis. They're our marketing 2-person marketing team, and they do all of our content you see on BAT and our own social media platforms, and they do great. But I run a lean and mean operation, and I just have great team members. Like, I really enjoy what I do, and I love seeing people succeed and be happy.
Fantastic. That's such good stuff. One of the things I always like to ask folks, and I'm really curious about your answer, Cam, is what was the last great thing you drove, or the last thing that got you really excited, or maybe surprised you?
That's a great question. That's a really great question. I drove a brand new GT3 Touring, and sometimes I feel like these modern cars are so tectonic, and they're so good. I mean, they're so usable, right? Like, I think you have one of the best 911s ever made. The 996 GT3 is a pure driver's car.
Well, we're about the same age again. I remember it on Road and Track. The red one, it was the first GT3 they brought here, drifting across the cover of Road and Track. That's an image seared into my brain.
Yeah, I know exactly. I know that. You know exactly what
Yeah, I
you're talking
bet you do.
But I was so impressed, and I understand now. Like, we know Porsche, and again, we can get down this rabbit hole being critical about all these quote unquote special models. If they're making 900 of them or 2,000 of them, I mean, what's the sustainability of this marketplace of all the new GT variants, right? But I understand it from a philosophical, innate, emotional state when I drove that car and I got to spend a whole day. I got to drive it for about 4 or 5 hours, and I was impressed with it because it's kind of the car that's going to lead this new generation of folks into the rabbit hole, and that's how they get to the 996. This is how they get to the 993 through the products. And it doesn't have to be a GT3 Touring. It can be, I mean, the new Carrera S. Actually, I drove that on a track recently. It's just a great car.
Hmm.
I'm not down with the greenhouse, and it's a lot of screens, and it's a bigger. We all say it's big, but this is the rabbit hole of like bringing the new generation of folks into the hobby, and they will become Porsche fanatics.
Yeah. Wide
Or they're,
10.
or they're going to stay in their little niche thing. And these guys are broken into two like bookends. They drive their cars, or they completely leave them in the garage.
Yeah. Yeah. I even that I've softened on. Do whatever you want. It's your
Yeah,
car.
that's it. It's your car. It's your
you
car.
know?
It's your life.
Totally. One thing I meant to ask you earlier, I kept calling the 906 through 917 generation plastic Porsches. Is that a derogatory term? That's what I've always called them.
No,
Yeah.
plastic fantastic. I call it plastic fantastic.
Oh, that's even better.
Yeah, plastic fantastic. Yeah.
At Monterey a couple years ago, there was one of the Spyder 908s coming out of a trailer right across from a hotel, and I grabbed a bunch of our young BAT staffers. I was like, "You guys got to come look at this!" And this is my favorite plastic Porsche. And this sporty older gentleman with a gold Rolex walked up and he goes, "They're my favorite plastic Porsches too." And of course, it was his car, and I was worried I'd
Uh,
offended him with the term.
what's so special about those plastic Porsches, starting with the 906, is that greenhouse that you're literally sitting on the ground,
Mhm.
and the 906 weighed just over 1,200 pounds. So you're on the same weight of a 550 Spider, and that many years later, and you have a engine. The fuel injected car did 230. So that's an incredible weight to power ratio. But it's really that greenhouse. It's so special because you're laying on the ground like a Formula One style, and the greenhouse, because it's just a greenhouse, a canopy, like it's glass everywhere, so you're in this like bubble, little missile bubble. It's amazing.
Man, even just to sit in a 906, I've always wondered about, the seats are so far laid back. It's fascinating to
Well,
even just
you
to
have
look
an
at them.
open invitation, Alex. If you ever come to North Carolina, we'll take El Tigre out, our famous car that won the South American Championship, and it looks like Tiger. That's why they called it El Tigre. But it's one of the four 906Es that the factory made.
What is an E?
So it just stands for Etzenbrug, which is fuel injection.
Oh, right, like 912E, like my car. Okay, gotcha.
Exactly. So
Yeah. Interesting. So, because I always thought those 2-liter motors, they were 210 horse. That's with carbs, and then 230 with MFI on it. Is
with
that the
MFI.
deal?
Yep,
Oh
exactly.
man, I bet those things scream.
So it's a ripper. Yeah.
I bet. Have you driven a 911R before?
Yes. Yep. My family, we had chassis 17, and then we had chassis 3, the original R's. And we had a fuel injected. 17 was a fuel injected car, one of the two cars they made with the Kugelfischer MFI. And then we had a carburetor Weber car, which was chassis 3.
Do they feel significantly different just than a short
Oh my
wheelbase
god,
S?
yeah. It's
Yeah.
like, so that's the lightest 911 ever made, still to this day, and it is. It's like driving a go kart with a rocket in the back. It's just it's. I've never understood. Those cars sell. And that many have been. None of them been sold in the public in a very long time. But I still don't understand why those cars cannot bring over 6 million, because it's a very special thing. It's just because it's a 911. But when
Yeah.
you really take it apart theoretically, and you understand how light it is, anything that's under a sub 2,000 pound car 911 is pretty impressive.
Yeah. Agreed. All right, Cam, we're gonna have to do this again. I want to let you go, but we only scratched the surface as far as I'm concerned. Any parting shots? Anything you want to let folks know about before we break?
No, I just really appreciate all the feedback we've had with our Group P auctions. I've done those with my dear friend Steve Serio, the Bond Group, and he's done a great job with Bring a Trailer. I'm really excited. When we embraced Bring a Trailer, it just opened a whole new world. It's been great advertising of what we do as a brand and what we're passionate about. And I just really appreciate the format, because I love bringing unique Porsches there. And people are like, oh, this is going to be fun to watch, or this will never sell. And, I think we're debunking a lot of myths of like taking super rare niche cars to BAT.
Well, we love having you and Road Scholars on the site, Cam. We love Sirio too. Feminod is his username.
Yes.
He's another early supporter like you. We love whenever he's got something on the platform as well. Those Group P collections. I wish we'd spend a little more time talking about. And there's so many amazing cars. We could do a whole episode just on going through each one of the cars that you listed there. I mean, all
Yeah.
those early 356s. And man, I meant to ask you about that. It was a model I didn't even know about, the yellow
Super 90
356.
GT.
Yeah. Uh
Yeah,
huh.
Paul Zuckerman bought that car, and if you're on the gram, he's pretty famous on there, and he has the show with Spike Ferriston,
Oh,
and
I love listening to Zuckerman. He is
yes,
fantastic
he's
on that
great.
podcast.
He's like, exactly where he stands on every
Yeah.
race.
Speaking about plain spoken folks, right?
And he loves that car. Like he bought that car after the auction, and he drives the shit out of it. And
Yeah.
I love seeing people enjoy their cars.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not judgmental. If you never drive it, fine. But I love when people that they only made 14 of those, and he's ripping around in that car. So it's awesome.
Couldn't agree more. We can leave it there, Cam. That's perfect. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you making the time. Hopefully, we can do it again, and maybe we'll run into each other down in SoCal later this month.
We definitely got together at Air and Water. So Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, dude. Really appreciate you making the time. Thanks to all of you for listening. Feedback, questions, concerns, podcast at bringatrailer.com. We'll see you next time.